The Last Light. I speak now of the time before the sky was broken, when our world, Aetha, pulsed with living radiance, and the tides of light were our breath and our memory. I was Seral then, and I am Seral still, though the glow within me is dimmer than it once was. Our people, the Aurelians, lived by the rhythm of illumination. We rose with the bloom of the shore fields. We sang in the shifting waves of color that bent across the coast. And when the long night came, we rested inside the cradle of our inner glow, our bodies soft and bright as woven threads in a vast tapestry. We did not know of hunger, as the humans would name it. We did not know of conquest or the shadow of steel. Our needs were small. Our gifts were light and song, and the sharing of memory across the luminous fields. We were born into glow, and we dissolved into glow, and the circle was unbroken. I remember a night when the tide was calm, the ocean barely stirring, the light flowers open across the plain, and I looked upward, for the sky was a mirror to me as much as the water. And there I saw a wound appear. It was not made of light. It was a line darker than the stars, a shape moving without shimmer, a stitch of absence across the heavens. At first I thought it a shadow from my own failing sight, yet others saw it too, a faint movement, like a predator gliding far above the nets of starlight. The days that followed were quiet, but not the same. Our rituals were heavy. Our songs carried doubt. I felt within my chest an unsteady hum, as if the fields themselves anticipated something unknown. I listened through the currents of light, and I heard it again, a low vibration, unlike any tide. It was steady, mechanical, a hum that grew stronger each cycle. It came from the dark object circling beyond the clouds. We did not name it. We had no word for such a thing, but we watched and we remembered, for our kind has always been the keepers of memory. And though I did not yet know it, that was the beginning of the long night that would take from us what we believed eternal. This is how the watching began, and this is how the first shadow fell upon our world.
The first machines came quietly. They were not shaped like beings, but like shells cast from some other shore. They lowered themselves upon our coast with legs of metal and arms that spun with hunger. They touched the living fields and tore strips of light from the soil and from the plants whose glow sustained us. Maru was the first among us to see them closely. He was young, his glow still sharp and eager. He followed the strange machines into the fields. He reached out with a pulse of greeting, with patterns that said, "We are here, we are living." But the machines did not answer. They continued to strip and consume, leaving a trail of dim silence where once there had been brightness. When he returned to us, his glow was unsettled, broken in places like water struck by stone. He told the council that something had arrived, something that did not listen. Our council gathered in the chamber of shifting hues, and we debated in voices slow and careful. Eln said we should hide, that all storms pass. Vel said we must learn the shape of these intruders, and I listened and spoke only that we must wait and watch. That night, as we lit the ritual fields, the machines had left behind a marker. It was tall, rigid, and burning with a light not our own. Its glare cut across our songs and bent the fields into silence. We tried to continue the ritual, but the harmony failed. The glow would not rise. The children wept, and the elders looked upon me as if I had an answer. I had none. Only the knowledge that something vast and unfeeling had placed its hand upon our world, and that the cycle of our light was already beginning to fray.
The machines did not leave. They returned in greater number each cycle, and soon the coast where we had gathered for countless generations no longer glowed with the same living strength. Tall frames of metal stood upon the shore, their arms sinking deep into the soil, their bellies full of stolen radiance that they lifted into the sky, where larger vessels waited like predators circling above. Vel counted the scars each day. He marked where the living light had been pulled away. Entire stretches of shore fields collapsed into silence. Once bright plants turned black and brittle. The loss was not only beauty, it was life itself. For our bodies pulsed in rhythm with the land, and when the land dimmed, so too did we. Children weakened, elders lost the steady glow that marked their memory. I went once to the edge of the human rigs. I did not know the word human then. I only saw figures inside the machines, their forms heavy with coverings, their voices harsh like grinding stone. I sent out the old greeting, a wave of light meant to show welcome. They did not reply, but I heard strange sounds carried by the wind, a single word repeated again and again. Earth, earth, earth. Later, one of their smaller craft rose from the ground. I felt the vibration in my chest as it lifted into the sky. Within it, I sensed containers, and inside the containers our living light, harvested as if it were simple fuel. They carried it upward to their great dark ship, and then beyond our clouds. I understood then that what they took would never return, and that the circle of our glow was breaking. That night, a ritual failed for the first time in memory. A young one stood to call the dawn chorus, but the fields did not answer. The glow was absent, and the child collapsed into stillness, her body unable to kindle without the shore field's strength. Grief spread across us like a wave of black water, and in my heart a heavy weight formed. I began to see that these visitors were not passing shadows. They were a hunger that would not stop.
The change came swiftly, and with it the first taste of violence. Until that time, we had only known dimming and sorrow, but not the shattering force that humans could wield. Their patrols descended, not as quiet machines, but as hunters with wings of fire. They landed near the western fields, where Maru and others still watched the fading glow. The young ones hoped to find a way to slow the harvest, or perhaps to signal peace. I remember the moment as if it still burns before my eyes. A beam erupted from the human craft, a line of searing heat that cut across the fields. The living plants ignited with a scream of light, and Maru, who had stepped forward with his glow extended in greeting, was struck down, his radiance torn apart in a burst that left only silence. I felt it inside me, as if my own core had been cracked. The song of his life ceased, and all around him others fell in confusion and pain. The sound of their weapons was unlike anything of our world. It was not the slow rhythm of tide or the crack of storm. It was rupture, pure and merciless, a rhythm of destruction that left nothing to answer it. Our council had no words for such force. Eln trembled and cried that we must flee into the deep caves and preserve what little memory we could. Vel shouted that hiding would only lead to slower death. He spoke of fighting, though we did not yet know how. That night we gathered in the chamber, and the air was thick with grief. Maru's glow had been bright and eager, a symbol of future now extinguished. Many voices cried for vengeance, others for silence. I listened, and within myself something unfamiliar began to grow. A knot of heat, not sorrow alone, but anger. And in that anger, the thought that perhaps we must act, not merely endure.
I had never known such a feeling before, yet it stayed with me through the long night, and I understood that the cycle of our people had shifted forever. The caves became our refuge, though we had never lived beneath stone. Our kind had always thrived in open air and glowing fields, yet now we pressed into the darkness, carrying what fragments of living plants we could save. The elders shaped the walls with their slow pulses of light, carving chambers where the glow might continue, though dimly. Children slept close to one another, their small radiance flickering with fear. I walked among them, listening to their shallow breaths, each one weaker than in the days before. Vel spoke often of striking back. He imagined ways to use the fragments of light we still held to create bursts of energy against the machines. But Eln opposed him, saying that violence would only draw more wrath, that our only chance was to preserve memory until these beings departed. Yet I had seen their hunger. I knew they would not leave until all was taken. In the nights, I returned alone to the surface, where I could see the human ships above the sky, like dark wounds against the stars. Their engines rumbled with a sound that shook the soil. I felt the pull of their harvesters, still tearing the life from our shore fields and lifting it skyward. Once I approached close enough to see the figures within their suits, heavy and sealed, their faces hidden by glass. I wondered if they could see me, standing there, glowing weakly in the night. I wondered if they felt anything at all. One evening, I found a fallen shard from one of their machines. It pulsed faintly with captured energy. When I touched it, a vision flickered across my mind, not of our world, but of theirs, a planet scarred with emptiness, oceans turned to dust, skies choked with fire. The word returned again and again. Earth, 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 then silence. I understood then what drove them, a desperation as deep as our grief. They had already lost their own glow, and now sought to feed upon ours. I carried the shard back to the council chamber. When I told them what I had seen, silence fell heavy across the gathering. The knowledge that these invaders were not merely cruel, but broken themselves. It did not lessen the pain of our losses, but it made clear that this hunger would not end, and that the choice before us was not between peace and war, but between fading quietly or rising to resist.
The council did not reach harmony that cycle. Voices rose and clashed against each other, louder than I had ever known among our kind. Vel demanded we learn the shapes of the human weapons. He said their shards could be turned back upon them, that their own fire could be twisted to defend our world. Eln resisted, trembling with fear. She argued that to fight would end in our complete destruction. She wanted us to flee deeper into the caves, to wait until the humans exhausted the land and left behind only dust. I listened, and my core felt divided. I still carried the shard of their machine. It pulsed in my hands with a rhythm that did not belong to us. I knew that Vel's words carried danger, yet I also knew Eln's path led only to silence. For if the glow of the shore fields died, there would be no memory left to preserve. What good was hiding if the songs themselves were gone? That night, I returned again to the surface and stood upon the blackened field where Maru had fallen. The sky above was filled with human ships, their lights blinking like false stars. I extended my glow, weak as it was, and whispered across the air, not with sound, but with pattern. I do not know if they heard me, but I tried to speak a single truth. We are alive. We are not fuel. We are not silence. There was no answer, only the rumble of their engines and the grinding arms of their harvesters.
Yet in the stillness after, I felt something stir within myself. The anger had not left. It had grown sharper like a blade. I thought of the children in the caves, fading slowly. I thought of the elders who remembered songs now broken, and I felt the weight of a choice pressing upon me. When I returned to the council, I spoke for the first time with firmness. I said that waiting was death, that fleeing was death, that only action gave even a shadow of survival. Some turned away in fear, but others lifted their glow toward mine, and for a moment the chamber shimmered with fragile unity. We did not yet know how to fight, yet in that instant we chose that we would. The first act of defiance was small, yet it carried the weight of our decision. Vel led a group of young ones to the surface, where the harvesters dug deep into the shore fields. They carried shards like the one I had found, pieces of human machines still glowing with stolen energy. By studying their patterns, Vel had learned to release the energy all at once. It was dangerous, unpredictable, but it was the only tool we had. They waited until a harvester lowered itself close to the ground, its arms reaching into the soil like claws. Vel raised the shard and released the energy. A burst of light erupted, brighter than dawn. For an instant, the field was filled with brilliance. Then the machine collapsed, its limbs folding in on themselves, smoke rising into the night sky. The humans within cried out in voices harsh and frightened, and for the first time they fled instead of advancing. When the group returned to the caves, the people gathered around them in awe. Never before had we seen the invaders turn away. The chamber glowed with cautious hope. Songs rose, unsteady, yet filled with a strength we had almost forgotten. Eln warned that this would only bring more violence, that the humans would return with greater force. But even she could not deny the stir of life that had been rekindled. I sat apart from the celebration and felt both pride and dread. The shard still pulsed within me, and in its rhythm I sensed something deeper. Each time we unleashed its energy, the fragment dimmed, and the captured glow within it faded. These weapons of resistance were carved from our own lifeblood, taken and twisted by human hands. To use them was to spend what little of ourselves we still had, yet to do nothing was to vanish more quickly. That night, I dreamed of Maru. His young glow unbroken, he walked beside the black shore fields and looked upon me with silent eyes. I reached for him, but he dissolved into ash. I woke with a heaviness inside, knowing that the path ahead would demand more than bursts of stolen light. It would demand choices that would scar us forever. The humans answered swiftly. Their ships descended in greater numbers, their fire tearing across the horizon. They did not wait for harvest alone. Now they came to hunt. They searched the coast and the caves with beams of burning light, and wherever they found us, they struck without hesitation. Whole stretches of shore fields turned to ash, the sky filled with smoke until even the stars were hidden. We moved deeper into the caverns, carrying children and fragments of glow. The air grew thin and heavy, but we pressed on. The echoes of our steps like sorrowful drums. Urged us to fight harder, to strike not only harvesters, but the great ships above. He believed if we could wound even one, the humans might retreat. But the shards were few and fading. Each use drained what little radiance we still carried. In those dark tunnels, I listened to the voices around me. They no longer sang as before. They whispered, sharp and fearful. They spoke of Maru and others lost. They spoke of the humans who seemed endless and merciless. Some doubted the choice we had made to resist, saying the price was too high. But others whispered that at least we no longer faded quietly, that in striking back we had shown we still lived. One night, as we hid in silence, a rumble shook the stone above. Dust fell from the cavern roof, and we knew another vessel had landed nearby. I moved to the surface alone, careful and slow. From a ridge I saw them clearly for the first time. Not machines, but the humans themselves, their coverings peeled away, their faces revealed, pale, marked with scars, their eyes weary, yet burning with hunger. They spoke to one another in voices harsh and broken, and in those voices I heard not only command, but desperation. One of them collapsed to his knees, clutching at the air, his body trembling. Another lifted him, and their eyes turned skyward as if searching for salvation, not conquest. For a moment I felt their grief as keenly as my own. Then the moment ended. They returned to their harvest, tearing at the earth with ruthless hands, but I carried with me the memory of that glimpse. They were not demons. They were dying, and in their dying, they were taking us with them.
The caves could not shelter us forever. Hunger of the body and hunger of the glow gnawed at us each day. Weaker than the last, the children dimmed their radiance, barely flickering, and the elders whispered that soon our memory itself would fade. Without the living fields above, we were shadows of what we had been. Vel refused to yield. He gathered those still strong, and with shards remaining, he planned to strike the great vessel that circled above, the wound in the sky that had first appeared cycles ago. He believed its destruction would shatter the invader's will. I feared the cost, yet I could not deny the truth of his words. If we remained hidden, we would wither. If we reached for the sky, we might still fall, but we would fall with fire. I stood before the council and spoke my heart. I told them of the vision I had seen through the shard of earth, broken and barren. I told them of the human I had watched collapse upon the shore, desperate and weak. I said they were not gods nor demons, only a people ruined by their own hunger, and now desperate to consume others. I said that if we struck at their vessel, we must do it not for vengeance, but to preserve what little light still pulsed within us. That night we prepared. The shards were bound together, woven with the last strength of our singers, their voices shaping the energy into a single great pulse, one that might reach the sky and tear through the hull of the vessel. We carried it to the high cliffs overlooking the blackened shore fields. The wind howled and the glow of our bodies flickered, but together we lifted the shard toward the heavens. The sky roared as the humans sensed our gathering. Their smaller craft descended, spitting fire upon the cliffs. Stones shattered around us. Many fell, their light extinguished. Yet we held the shard high, and the chorus began. Voices broken yet fierce. One last song rising into the storm. The shard pulsed, brighter, brighter, until it was as if a sun had bloomed in our hands. And then, with a cry that split the air, we released it upward.
The shard rose like a star born from our grief. Its light streaked across the heavens, striking the great vessel that circled above. For a breathless instant, the sky itself seemed to split. A silence deeper than any night filled the air. Then came the sound, a tearing roar as the vessel shuddered, fire bursting from its sides. Pieces of burning metal rained down into the sea, and the darkness that had hovered for so long began to falter. For a heartbeat, we believed we had done it, that the hunger had been broken. The cliffs glowed with our triumph, though dim and ragged. Our voices sang as one, yet the victory was not without cost. The blast had consumed many of us. Those nearest to the shard dissolved into silence, their light scattered into the wind. Vel among them, his body a beacon that burned brightest at the last, then was gone. I felt the weight of his sacrifice pressing heavy within me. Above the wreckage still lingered other vessels, smaller but unbroken. They did not flee. Instead they circled like vultures, their engines low, their weapons ready. But they did not descend at once. They hesitated, perhaps in fear, perhaps in grief for their fallen. I watched and wondered if in that moment they saw us not as fuel, not as prey, but as a people willing to burn our own lives to defend what little we had left. The days that followed were quiet, the harvesters withdrawn, the skies empty save for distant lights. We did not know if the humans would return with greater fury, or if our strike had wounded them enough to turn them elsewhere. We only knew that our world was scarred, the shore fields blackened, the blow faint and trembling, yet still alive. I walk now among the ruins. The children cling to the fragments of light that remain, their songs weak but real. I tell them of Maru, of Vel, of all who gave their radiance, so that even in this dimming we might still remember. I do not know if we will endure, or if this is only the slowing of the end, but I know this: our light is not yet gone, and while it burns, even faintly, we are still here. We are still Aurelian. We are still alive.